Yes, we can start, sir.
Welcome, Mr. Yusuf. Thank you very much for joining us and giving this presentation on a very important day, Earth Day. Thank you very much for joining us, and over to you. You can start your presentation.
Right. Good morning, everybody. It is such a pleasure to join you all this morning. My name is Yusuf. I run a green building consulting firm right here in Coimbatore under the name Inhabit. And under Inhabit, we also design and commission our own version of DWAT systems, that is decentralized wastewater treatment. And I also run a company called Buildscape, which is a Dr. Fixit distributor and a large-scale applicator for Coimbatore district, specializing in waterproofing and building restoration services. And Buildscape does a few other things. We also do things like campus landscaping and a few other things. We are soon going to launch a new co-working space and a business center called Inhabit at Work in Mill Road, Coimbatore. It's a 10,000 square feet co-working space. I will talk about it a little later in the presentation, because this co-working space is going to be one of the first co-working spaces to have a radiant cooling system functioning there. So that's something that we will talk about, and hopefully we'll open at the end of the year. Right. So we often get asked this question. What is it that green building consultants do, and what is the exact role that we play in any project team? Because if you think about it, say 10 years back or even 8 years back, green building wasn't even a thing. So you wouldn't have green building consultants on any project team. It was a fairly new phenomenon. Now, even 8-10 years back, of course, the HVAC consultants used to design the systems most efficiently. Plumbing consultants would give you the most logical way to manage your water resources, and so goes for electrical consultants. So all consultants gave the most efficient design to the best of their abilities anyways, irrespective of green building or not. But what used to happen is, unfortunately, that all of these people used to work in relative isolation. There wasn't much integration. So say if an architect gave the plumbing consultant a very senseless drawing, probably it doesn't make, there are a lot of flaws. You'd rarely find that the plumbing consultant will, take it up in any way, or even the HVAC consultant. With the drawing given to them, they will do the best possible job. There was no integration among them. Now, what green building rating systems have done is it provides a framework. It provides a framework to combine all these efforts in a way and bring them all together for a common purpose and a shared goal, which of course is sustainably built environment or a high performance green building that promotes occupant comfort and a sense of well-being. So this is a key contribution of green building design, and we as green building consultant, we facilitate this particular framework. Okay, so if you were to ask me what is the single biggest contribution going through a green building framework gives a project, is, I would say it is integrated design. Especially in the early stages of a project, green building requires all consultants to come on board, sit around a table and discuss the project with a shared goal being sustainably built environment. Of course, the other goals are also there, aesthetics and performance and all those things are anyways taken care of. But now there is suddenly a shared goal, which is sustainably built environment. So that is, in my opinion, a great contribution of a green building framework. Now, my topic for today is areas of focus when building green. So I'm going to talk about why are green buildings so relevant, how have they become suddenly so important, areas of focus when building green, and I will show you a few slides of the radiant cooling system that we have installed in our own building, and then we'll do a Q&A session as time permits. Right. Now, I'm sure you have seen the slide a million times. The only reason I have put it here is because there is a common misconception that green buildings are expensive. But the truth is economic viability and social equity are an integral part of a green building framework. And you will realize that as we go along the presentation. So, of course, what is the point of building green homes, extremely greenest of green homes that no one can afford, right? But after seeing the events of the last couple of months, I think somewhere we need to add the word resilient in this chart, because what I've realized is just 1 month's lockdown has completely thrown our economic system haywire. We are unable to bear even 1 month of lockdown. Trillions of dollars have been lost, lakhs of jobs have been lost. So, some serious questions have to be raised on our economic system. I mean, I'm talking about the global economic system. Why does our economic system require such constant and relentless growth? Where if India doesn't grow at say 5-6% a year, we start losing jobs. We are unable to get people out of poverty unless we are growing at 6-8%. So these are some serious questions that are not within the scope of our discussion today. But I think when we talk about sustainable development going forward, I think these are things that we need to discuss. How can we bring about resilience in our economy? Right. Of course, talking about sustainable development, there are many areas that humans are working on to reduce our impact. I'm sure all of y'all are doing your own thing. And there's plenty of work happening in the green mobility space, with electric vehicles and stuff. A lot of good work has happened in renewable energy space. Now solar and wind are on par with grid now. Of course, waste management, water management. So there's plenty happening. And green buildings is just one of them, right? So it is just one of the things that we do. But in my opinion, it is the lowest hanging fruit in the sustainable development brigade. Why I say that is because green buildings are fairly easy to design and construct. What I mean by easy to design and construct is you don't really require a major technological leap to build a green building. Like the kind of technological leap we require, say in green mobility or renewable energy. We have known green building principles for the last for many centuries now. It's just that we stopped using them as much. So the technology and the know-how was already there. Of course, they don't cost much more to build. In many developed economies, I think buildings use close to 40% of electricity consumption. I think in India, it might be closer to 30-35%. Buildings, of course, are a major water consumer, especially in developed economies. Here, of course, it's agriculture. It's a large used water and waste generator. It contributes significantly to the GDP and is a huge employment generator. I mean, we all know the importance of the real estate sector when it comes to employment generation and the contribution it has to the GDP. So all these reasons, I think it just makes a low-hanging fruit. It's something that we can get easy results, quick results, if we deal with making buildings more efficient. And of course, the other thing is that say if I mean, assuming most people say that 60% of our country is yet to be built. So imagine if we build those 60% inefficiently, so we tend to lock in that inefficiency for many decades or even a century, because that's how long the buildings last. So it's very important to build green right away. Right now is the time. Right. So what is a green building? Green buildings use energy, water, and other resources more efficiently. They protect occupant health, improve productivity, and reduce waste, pollution, and environmental degradation. I'll just repeat that for you. Green buildings use energy, water, and other resources more efficiently, protect occupant health, improve productivity, and reduce waste, pollution, and environmental degradation. All of this compared to a conventional building. Now, you might ask, what is a conventional building and who defines a conventional building? Well, this is where the various national and international standards come in. So your ASHRAE and ISHRAE, International Plumbing Code, the National Building Code, ECBC, ASTM standards. There are green material certifications now available. So what IGBC, GREHA, or the LEED rating systems do is, they take all these standards that are already available for various things in a built environment, and they tell you that, okay, this is a ASHRAE standard, make sure you are 20 to 30% more efficient than this, and we will give you points accordingly, based on the final performance. So this is how a green building rating system works. They don't actually create any standards, they just borrow standards, and they bring it all together in a holistic manner. Sorry, something is... Just 1 second, audience. Yeah, Jagan, can you confirm if my presentation is visible?
Yeah, now it is
Yes,
visible.
sir.
Right. Okay. So yeah, so this is what this is how the green building rating systems work, and they are the ones who define what a conventional building is. But according to me, a green building should ideally also help its occupants to become self-sufficient and improve their ability to survive in non-ideal conditions. Now, I mean, we all know that we are currently in the midst of the most non-ideal situation in our history. You know, it doesn't get worse than this. So, according to me, good green buildings would, once the lockdown ends, they will ensure that there is no further spread of infection. You know, various ways. You know, by reducing contact, by automated doors, sensor-based taps, having a very good cleaning protocol, having hand sanitizers and hand washing facilities, contactless water dispensers. So buildings that have these kind of facilities will probably have lesser chance of infection spreading compared to buildings that are designed in the conventional way. So these are the kind of aspects that are becoming more and more important. Talking about green building, I think by this time next year, disease control will probably be an important aspect of building green. I'm quite sure. Right. So when we start working on a green building project, this is how we prioritize our strategies for going green. So this is listed in the basis of priority. So things that are high priority have been listed on top. So in our case, we've listed water efficiency as top priority in our country, because it's just that water scarcity is a lot more harder to resolve compared to energy scarcity. So that's why water efficiency takes precedence, and also the payback is actually much poorer with regards to water efficiency compared to energy efficiency. So it's harder to sell to clients. I'm going to quickly run through these points one by one, just to give you an overview. We won't, few things we can discuss technically, but we'll largely keep it only as an overview, just so that you all know what is it that we do during green building process. Right. So areas of focus when designing for water efficiency. Now, in most buildings with a large campus, there's of course a large landscape area, so which consumes actually the majority of the water resources. So here we try to reduce the lawn use, increase native trees and shrubs, and introduce concepts like xeriscaping, which is a concept where you don't require any further irrigation once you've done the planting. We try to introduce high efficiency plumbing fixtures, so things like low flow fixtures, waterless urinals. Yeah, waterless urinals are actually quite important nowadays, not just in green buildings. Even in other buildings now, I think waterless urinals are being adopted at a high speed, I would say. Wastewater treatment, so decentralized treatment and reuse for flushing and landscaping, grey water treated separately and reused for domestic purposes. So these are kind of features that need to be there in most green buildings. In fact, we are doing a residential project in Bangalore right now. It's called Co-Evolve Northern Star. So there, what the project team has done is we have separated the black water and the grey water. The black water we are treating separately. The grey water we are treating, and we are bringing it back through a carbon filter and RO filter, and we are using it for domestic purposes like bathing and washing and things like that. So what this building has achieved to do is it has achieved water neutrality. It in fact produces more water than it consumes over the year. So those kind of things are happening in India as we speak. Next one, of course, is rainwater harvesting and reuse. The aim here generally is to ensure a zero discharge site. So, every drop of water that falls in your site, you have to ensure that not even a drop leaves the site. So you can do that either through rainwater storage or through rainwater recharge into the ground. So the rainwater harvesting is extremely important as far as green building is concerned. Fifth point is efficient irrigation. As I said, landscapes consume a lot of water. So having a proper automated irrigation system is a must. Your sprinkler and drip irrigation system that have some kind of an automation to ensure limited water use for maintaining your landscape. Sixth one is measurement, verification and action. Here essentially we need to meter all major water consuming areas, and provided any all major water consumers, so submetering is very critical. And for larger projects, we also integrate things like SCADA systems so that water can be centrally managed. Energy efficient architecture. You all might not be able to read this. I'll just read it for you. So the idea of energy efficient design is to modulate the conditions such that they are always within or as close as possible to comfort zone. Modulations are introduced by landscape, built form, envelope, materials, and other control measures. Bring the conditions within the range throughout the 24 hours. So this is the goal of energy efficient architecture. So basically the idea is the building has to be close to comfort zone throughout the 24 hours. That is the main purpose of energy efficient architecture. So what do we look at? The first one and the most critical one in my opinion is of course building orientation. So a right oriented orient the building on the east. So ensuring the larger axis is oriented on your east-west will minimize, and minimizing east and west glazing will straight away ensure about 15% energy efficiency. I think a good example for this would be the Brookfields Mall. So you just imagine the Brookfields Mall, the same mall, now that it is located on the east-west axis, if you just turn it 90 degrees, I can assure you the same mall will save about 15% energy. Of course, they don't have the site to do it, but just to give you an idea. So that's an easiest way to save energy. That is your building orientation. Next one is of course building design and envelope. Here we essentially look at providing optimum shading, improving your daylighting and ventilation, and use of energy efficient envelope. That is your glass, high performance glass, high performance window wall assembly, high performance roof assembly. So these are the critical items that we look at when we look at efficient envelope. Third one is of course HVAC. In some buildings that even I have worked on, almost 60% of the energy consumption actually happens in HVAC. So it is extremely important to ensure optimum HVAC sizing and ensure energy efficient air conditioning equipment. Of course, you can consider integrating other ultra efficient technologies like radiant cooling, ground source heat pumps, evaporative cooling, because these are all options available as well. So as you can see now, there is a good synergy between water efficiency and energy efficiency. So for example, if a building has good water management, there is always a possibility for the HVAC consultant to recommend water cooled chillers instead of air cooled chillers, because water is available. So many projects that we are working on, the clients don't want to take a chance with water cooled chillers simply because they're too scared about water scarcity. So this is where again, there is a lot of interconnection between water efficiency and energy efficiency, you might notice. The fourth point is of course efficient lighting and equipment. Here essentially we need to ensure the lighting design is as per the requirement. We are not overlighting, we are not underlighting. We need to use efficient pumps and motors and gensets, lifts. So I was speaking to somebody from Grundfos and they were telling me that now IE4 motors and pumps are available in the market. And he was telling me that the payback now is only 8 or 9 months. There is absolutely no reason anymore to actually go for anything below IE4 motors, especially in green buildings. Fifth one, of course, is renewable energy. So solar, wind and biogas, these are the options available to us. Most of our buildings go for solar, but again, one of our projects in Bangalore actually has a 3 kilowatt wind turbine on the roof. It's not very big, it's just 3 kilowatts. And what we have noticed is that the wind turbine is actually doing better than the solar power system, the rooftop solar power system there. I mean, of course, it's a tall building, it's 13 floors. But what happens is in urban scenarios, there is so much pollution that somehow the light that comes on the solar panels is kind of diffused, either due to the smog, or in places like Tirupur and all that, you'll find that most solar panels have a dirty, oily layer that forms on top because of the pollution, which drastically reduces your solar performance. So this is where I think wind and biogas also can actually play an important role. So we shouldn't just blindly go for solar power. There are other options available as well. Sixth one, of course, is at the risk of repetition. It's again measurement, verification, and action. So here we have to ensure sub-metering of all major energy consuming areas. We have to try and integrate smart metering so that from one computer, I can see where energy is being consumed, where energy is being wasted. So I can, and of course, BMS in larger buildings, BMS is a great option to provide better controls and analysis. Right. The third one, of course, is site sustainability. So here we look at managing on-site water. So here the idea is essentially to limit the site runoff through pervious paving, sustainable urban drainage strategies, rainwater harvesting. So the idea is, when there is a heavy rainfall, we should not allow too much water to escape our site. I mean, when you look at the Chennai floods and the Mumbai floods, this is what happens. When there's too much concreting, water escapes too quickly, and then the infrastructure is not equipped to handle that kind of flow. So here the idea is to reduce your flow by bringing in various strategies. Protect open habitat. Here the idea is to limit site disturbance, increase green spaces, and plant protected areas. So if some of you might have visited the IGBC CII center in Hyderabad, there you will notice that almost 50% of the site, they've just left it completely as a protected area. So they haven't done any landscaping, any building, it's just left to nature. It was just beautiful. It's like as if you're in a forest in the middle of the city. So in projects where that is an option, I think we should consider such a strategy. A third one, of course, is very important, public transportation. So you will notice that most green building rating systems, especially the American systems, that is the LEED rating system, gives a lot of importance to buildings that are close to public transport. So buildings that have, say, access to shuttle services or metros or bus stands. So these buildings tend to score more points. Next one is light pollution. Many of us may not realize, but actually the night light that we light, especially the ones that are facing the sky, they cause tremendous disturbance to our nocturnal species like bats and owls and other insects. So the idea of in most green buildings is that we must limit our light pollution. So whatever lighting we require in our site, we light that, and we do not allow the light to pollute the neighboring sites or the public spaces. That's the idea with regards to light pollution. Reduce heat island effect. Many of you might already know this. Here we essentially prescribe things like cool roof, green roof systems, shading, open grid paving, light colored pavers. So these are the kind of things that we do to reduce the overall heat island effect of the project. Sixth one is develop appropriate site. So here essentially what we look at is we try to develop, projects that are developed in high density in areas get more points. So especially in LEED rating system. So if your building is located in the center of a city in a high density area where all the infrastructure is already available, you don't need to bring in any new water or any new electric lines or any public transport, it's all available, tends to score more points in the green building rating system. Seventh one is encourage connectivity. So improve pedestrian access to services and public spaces. Eighth one is erosion and sedimentation control. Here we essentially try to reduce the loss of topsoil during construction. Many of you might know this, the topsoil takes approximately 70 years to actually regain its fertility. So if you were to remove topsoil and place it in one place, it will take 70 years through the natural means for it to regain its fertility. So the idea here is that we must protect the topsoil, store it separately, and then try to reuse it for landscaping and agricultural purposes. Alternate transportation. So idea here is to encourage things like bicycling, carpooling, electric charging facilities, shuttle services, these kind of things. So green building rating systems give a lot of priority to these kind of things. Alternate transportation, public transport, walkability. These kind of things have a great weightage in green building. Next one, of course, is one of the most important topics of green building. It's the indoor environment quality. Here, what do we look at? Plenty actually. So the first one is indoor air quality. Here, essentially, we try to ensure that there is improved fresh air ventilation, improved cross ventilation, and in air-conditioned buildings, we ensure that we follow the ASHRAE standards. That is the ASHRAE 62.1 for fresh air ventilation. And of course, there is also integration of germicidal lamps, HEPA filters, and MERV 13 filters. All that is also part of our green building rating system. But in my personal opinion, most green building systems, of course, require that we exceed the ASHRAE standards by 30%, the ASHRAE 62 standards. But in my personal opinion, I think that is very, very insufficient. So if you're designing buildings where most of the occupants are going to be seated indoors itself throughout the day, I suggest you exceed the ASHRAE standards by 60%, because I truly believe that 30% is grossly insufficient. And I think this is something that we can discuss after the presentation as well, for those of you who have an opinion regarding this. In fact, if I were to design my own building, I would probably double the ASHRAE. I would go 100% more than the ASHRAE standards if it is a densely occupied space. Next one is construction indoor air quality management. Here essentially we look at during construction, we try to control the spread of dust. We try to protect the HVAC equipment from getting contaminated through any dust or any other means. The absorbent materials that is stored in the site is well protected. The third one is green cleaning materials. Green cleaning policies are very much part of green building, and the idea here is to adopt non-toxic and organic cleaners and to move away from acidic and alkaline cleaning systems that of course have problems with regards to VOC emissions. Fourth one is air quality monitor. Of course, there are various things that we can monitor in terms of air quality, but I think in most green buildings at least, at minimum, we need CO2 sensors for densely occupied spaces, carbon monoxide sensors for, say, if there's basement parking, PM, particulate matter sensors, formaldehyde, and VOC. So in my opinion, these 5 sensors are definitely required in most buildings to ensure that we can manage the air quality of the building and ensure that people are working to their productive best. Because if any of these levels are too high, definitely productivity will go down and your health and well-being will go down. Fifth one is tobacco smoke control. Of course, strict policies around tobacco use and smoking is required. So most green building projects you will notice are declared as non-smoking zones. Sixth one is daylight and view. We have to provide sufficient daylighting to ensure our circadian rhythms. And of course, we need to provide connectivity to the exterior. So just having a view of flora, fauna, or the sky itself improves our productivity by, I think it's around 8 to 12%. Somebody has done research. So it is very important to provide daylight and views to the exterior. Seventh one is thermal comfort. Here essentially we look at providing, of course, meeting the ASHRAE 55 standard, and then of course providing user controls. So, I mean, every person should have access to opening or closing of windows, or easy access to a thermostat if they are feeling too cold or too warm. So those kind of things are definitely built into a green building rating system. Eighth one, of course, is interior lighting. So here we need to optimize lighting based on the requirement. And of course, we need to provide personal controls so that we can adjust as per the preference of the individual. So you'll notice that most green buildings will definitely have some form of task lighting. So that apart from the ambient lighting, there is always a task lighting, so you can always adjust that as per your requirement. Ninth one is low emitting materials. So your paints, adhesives, sealants, furniture, these kind of things need to be procured and need to be procured with a sense of using low VOC materials. So we have to ensure that we use low volatile organic compound paints and sealants. Areas of focus when planning for material and resources. This one is under a constant churn because with regards to materials, there's always a kind of a debate, what is a green material, what is not a green material. So there is always a bit of a churn happening. Right now, to the best of my knowledge, the way to manage material and resources is, first is you need to ensure waste management. So you need to have a segregation facility where you are segregating organic waste, inorganic waste, e-waste, everything. And you're able to manage it separately. Next one is material reuse. So green buildings do give points for projects that can somehow salvage materials. So if you manage to procure some old doors, repurpose it and reuse it as a new door, or if you manage to procure some broken tiles or marble, find a way to reuse it in your driveway. So these kind of things carry extra points in a green building rating system. Certified wood, this is a tough one in India. But there are points for using certified wood, that is FSC certified or PAFC certified. So this is wood basically that comes from sustainably managed forests, say in Sweden and Canada and things like that. So there are points for that. Fourth one is rapidly renewable materials. So here the idea is to encourage materials that have less than a 10-year harvest cycle. So think about things like bamboo, cork, eucalyptus. These kind of things can be harvested within 10 years and reused. So So there are points for rapidly renewable materials as well. Next one, of course, is regional materials. So green buildings, we prioritize procuring materials within a 400 kilometers radius. When I say procuring, I mean also mining and manufacturing should happen within a 400 kilometer radius to the extent possible. Next one is recycled content. So here essentially we try to use materials that have some amount of recycled content, like your fly ash, GGBS, or using re-rolled steel. Ceramic tiles have recycled content. Gypsum has recycled content. So various things that have recycled content is encouraged in green building. Seventh one is sustainable purchasing. So once the green building is done, of course, there will be some point where there will be some renovation that will happen, or some kind of rework that might happen. So we need to ensure that there is a sustainable procurement policy in place to ensure when this renovation happens, we follow the same guidelines that have been listed above. So that's the idea. But now with the new LEED rating system, the LEED 4.1, a lot of priority is given to using materials that are certified green materials and using materials that carry environmental to gate, cradle to gate environmental product declarations. So if some of you are material manufacturers, I think this is something that you all must consider, where you all must try to do a environmental product declaration for your product to show at least from cradle to gate, if not from cradle to cradle. Because I think that's going to become very, very important going forward. Next one is health and well-being. Going by the events that have happened in the last 3 months, I can assure you, if I was to do this presentation, say sometime next year, this health and well-being will probably be even above water efficiency, because it suddenly becomes so important. It was always part of green building, but I think it's just going to become extremely important going forward. So here, what do we look at? Quickly, we look at air. So here we essentially look at material selection, your ventilation, filtration, moisture control, your maintenance and operations to ensure optimum air quality within the building. Next is water. Here we ensure performance testing, maintenance and operation, treatment, encouraging hydration among occupants. These kind of things we look at when we talk about water efficiency. Next one is nourishment. So here we essentially look at in buildings where actually food is served, especially in most IT buildings where lunch and breakfast is usually provided. We look at things like providing healthy portions, encouraging mindful eating, ensuring food preparation happens in hygienic places. We try to bring in allergy control. So idea is to provide transparency where a person knows what he's eating, so that he knows what possible allergens are there in the food, and of course to provide access to healthy foods. To serve more fruit and vegetable in the menu. Next one is light. Here we try to ensure optimum daylighting to ensure proper circadian rhythm, proper color quality, daylighting, glare control, activity-based lighting. Next one is fitness. Here we look at encouraging physical activity spaces in the interior and exterior. We try to encourage building owners to bring about physical activity programs so that the occupants can be physically active during their work hours. Next one is comfort. Comfort, of course, is of many types. There's ergonomic comfort, acoustic comfort, olfactory comfort, thermal comfort, and of course accessibility. So all these comfort factors are taken into account when designing for a green building. Last but not the least is mind. There's plenty of research where connection to nature is really important. Engaging your stakeholders and occupants is really important. Providing altruism opportunities, providing wellness awareness. All these are very important aspects to ensure proper mind development and mind health. So these are things that not so much, but it is subtly taken care of in green buildings. Right. So next one is of course waste management, which I've discussed. We need to provide, reduce, segregate, manage organic waste within site, and of course most green buildings you will see that there is a separate zone for e-waste and hazardous waste. So these are very important as far as waste management is concerned. And of course, waste management during construction is also very high priority. So you'll find in most green buildings, over 85% of the waste is usually recycled or reused within site. Next point is measurement, verification, and action. this I've already mentioned. So the idea is to measure as much as possible. So measure your waste, energy, water, and take decisions according to that. Provide operation manuals, ensure service level agreements, and ensure commissioning of your equipment. So these are the kind of things that are very, very important for the operations of the building. Next one is make it easy for the occupants to be green. What I mean by this is often in my own projects, the customer asks me, when nobody is driving electric cars, why should I provide an electric charging point? When none of my residents are going to even ride a bicycle, why should I give you a bicycle parking facility? So the idea of green building here is that to provide the infrastructure so that it encourages the occupants to actually go green. So if you don't provide the infrastructure, they will definitely not go green. So if you provide an organic waste composter, they will probably segregate their organic waste and they might actually end up using it. But if you don't do it, it just gives them an excuse to not do it at all. So the idea of green building is to make it easy for the occupants to be green by providing the required infrastructure. 10th one, of course, is show off. By show off, what I mean is if you've done a green building, it is very, very important to benchmark your building with an appropriate rating system. That is why I encourage always, if you're going for a green building, it is always sensible to go for IGBC or GREHA or some kind of a rating system so that you have a third-party verification of the performance of the building. And that can be, of course, shared with the world to ensure that people who do not have knowledge about green building, so say an IT professional who does not know what a green building is, who does not know what a good tile is or what a good light is, he can just simply look at a green building certification and take a call. Yes, this is a slightly better building compared to a conventional building. So that's what I mean by show off. Now, only if you meet all the above 10 criteria, you are considered, it is considered to be a green building. Otherwise, it is not. So you can have a absolutely net zero building, but it is not a green building. A net zero building is a net zero building. It's not really a green building. When it comes to green building, you have to take a much more holistic approach and ensure that all the aspects that I have shown you are addressed in some form or the other. So that is what is a proper green building. And of course, we need to reduce what we use, we need to reuse what we use, we need to recycle what we use, and most importantly, we need to respect what we use. And I think that is exactly what green building does. It ensures that we respect what we use. Right. That brings me to the end of my presentation. But I mean, as Jagan, can I show them the radiant cooling system?
Yeah, you can just show the images of the pipes we have laid. So if there are any queries from the participants, we can answer to them.
Right. So that was my presentation on green building. Of course, we'll have a Q&A session regarding that as well. But before we move on to that, Jagan told me that participants will probably be interested in knowing a little bit about radiant cooling and how we've gone about doing it in our own project. I'll just show you an album that I've created for the radiant cooling system. Jagan, is my photo album visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, now the entire album is visible now.
Okay. So basically, this is a co-working space that we are coming up with in Coimbatore. It's a 10,000 square feet. So this building is now a four-story building. What we have done here is we have installed this radiant cooling system from REHA in the first floor roof. So what this does is it provides radiant cooling to the second floor and to the first floor. Of course, the cooling capacity is divided between the two, so it may not be as efficient as, say, having radiant cooling in both floors, but we have gone for this kind of a system. So these are some of the images. I just wanted to show you the construction. So what we've done is, after the formwork, we have done a layer of rebarring, reinforcement. And on top of that, you can see this rusted, the whole rusted wire-like thing. So that is a wire mesh that we have laid on top of that. It's about 100 mm to 150 mm gaps. And then we have laid the radiant cooling pipes, looping it around. and used a cable tie and tied it with the particular wire mesh. So I'm just showing you the assembly of the. So this is about 1,500 square feet of radiant cooling PEX pipes that we've installed. This was from Rehau, Germany. It's imported from Germany. We bought it from, I think, one of the distributors in Noida, if I'm not wrong. Here you can see that some of the PEX pipes are insulated. This is because these pipes are now running through a section which is an unconditioned space. So we've insulated that particular area around. Right. So after installing the radiant cooling pipe, we have one more layer of reinforcement above the PEX pipe itself. The PEX pipes are really strong. Of course, you can walk on it. You can do whatever. It doesn't break. But before you do this, they came and they ensured that we have pressure tested the whole system. So while we were installing this, there is actually water in it right now at 4 bar pressure to ensure that there is no bending of the pipes. That's the PEX pipes. I'll just show you the, yeah. Right, so that is the manifold. So all the pipes are basically looped from here. Yeah. So basically, this is the top. What you see on top is the inlet, and what you see on the bottom is the outlet. So you ensure that the pipe is fully looped and it comes back to the outlet. And now we've of course set it up at 4 bar pressure before doing the concrete. As per the recommendation of the manufacturer, we have gone for a 6-inch concrete slab as opposed to a conventional 5-inch slab, just to ensure that there is sufficient protection. So to ensure about 60 to 75 mm on top and 60-75 mm at the bottom, so that if there is any drilling in the future, there is no chance that the pipes can get affected. Coming to the cost, about 1,500 square feet of area I told you. We have so far spent around 3 lakh rupees on it. So for 3 lakh rupees, all we've got is the manifold that you're seeing and the PEX pipes and the cost of actually laying it. So I had to actually fly down a technician all the way from Delhi just to lay these pipes. So all that cost me quite a lot of money. And now going forward, we'll of course have to spend on treated fresh air unit. So we plan to provide a treated fresh air unit. So I'll tell you how the thermal comfort plan is going to go about. We have a treated fresh air unit, we have ceiling fans, and we have a VRF system along with the radiant cooling system. So as per our calculation, I think 80 to 90% of the time, the building should be comfortable even without the VRF system itself. But we still decided to go ahead with a small VRF system, say 12 to 16 ton. Mainly because of 3 reasons. One is to cater to shock loads. So in case there is a sudden surge of occupants in the building, we need to use this VRF system. Second is if we are worried that what if the dehumidification from the TFA unit is not sufficient. So we think that VRF is required to ensure optimum dehumidification just in case. And the third and most important reason is Jagan informed me that LG now has a system which comes with a hydro kit. So we are going to use the hydro kit to basically pump in cold water through the radiant cooling system. Of course, it will be pumped at below dew point to ensure that there is no condensation. So this is how we have planned our air conditioning system in the building. And I think the overall budget that we are looking at is close to 15 to 18 lakh rupees for I think around 6,000 square feet of conditioned space. Yeah. So that's the information I have so far. The building is still under construction, and hopefully we will launch in sometime in December. Jagan, is there something you want to add?
Yeah, I want to add. Thank you for your excellent presentation and showing the radiant cooling as well. I think we can have a separate session or site visit to your office once the project is done, so that our Coimbaturians will have a better look of the new technologies, which is one of its kind. It is implemented in our own city. Really thankful to you, Mr. Yusuf.
Thank you, Jagan.
Senthil sir.
Yeah, Jagan.
Sir, we can take some questions now if there are any.